All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's council meeting number 223. We will get proceedings underway. First of all, the council and the committee would like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people as the traditional owners of the land, skies and waterways in which we meet this evening. Pay respects to elders past and present and acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander members who are part of our greater Geelong community today. Welcome. Thank you, everybody, for making the trip in. It is very important that we have great public participation in meetings such as this, so welcome everybody to the chamber. And we're also live streaming this meeting as well. So all those viewing online, welcome. Firstly, I will introduce the committee. We have Councillor Mansfield, Councillor Nelson, Councillor Maloney. I'm Councillor Sullivan. We have Councillor Mason and Councillor Marahi here this evening. Note, we have apologies from Councillor Harwood, Councillor Contell, Councillor Aiken and Councillor Grisbeck. I will also introduce the officers here this evening. Joanne Van Slagren, Manager of City Development, John Rush, Coordinator of Statutory Planning, Marie O'Loughlin, who's Team Leader Statutory Planning, and Tracy McCook, Senior Statutory Planner, and Lewis Muston, Senior Statutory Planner. I'll now ask the committee if there's any declarations of conflict to be noted. Seeing as though not, if any do arise at the meeting, please let me know. Now for the confirmation of the minutes for the Planning Committee meeting held on the 24th of February 2022. Can I please have a mover? Will they be confirmed? Yeah, moved by Councillor Maloney, seconded Councillor Mason. All good. All right, I'll now outline the procedure for the events tonight. We have two items before us. The general way this will proceed will be as follows. The officer will present a brief summary of the written report towards the committee. The panel will then ask questions of the officer, if they have any, we usually do. Objectors and submitters will then have the opportunity to address the committee up the front here. And each speaker I ask to abide by the 3-minute speaking time. This is so that everybody can have the same amount of allotted time. It's the most egalitarian approach that we have. The panel will then also ask questions of submitters for clarification. Then, after that is done, we'll have the applicant will come forward and detail their application and respond to any queries that have been arisen thus far. That is their choice. And they will have 10 minutes at maximum to outline their case and to respond to questions should they wish. The panel may then actually ask the questions that they have. And then after that, that means we'll have heard from both objectors and the applicant. The panel will then discuss, ask further questions for clarification, should we have any, and then move a recommendation to be adopted. The decision of this committee is the final decision of council acting under delegated authority, and if anybody is aggrieved by the decision of the committee, they may appeal to the Victorian Civil Administrative Tribunal in Melbourne, and our staff can assist with this process during office hours. I believe the first matter we have for consideration, item 1, PP 3202021, 98 Marshalltown Road, Grovedale. And I believe Tracy will be making the first presentation. In your hands, Tracy. Thank you. And be careful, these microphones aren't that sensitive, so you might have to bring it close to your mouth.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to give a summary of 98 Marshalltown Road. The subject site is located on the south side of Marshalltown Road, 36 metres west of the intersection with Barwarry Road in Grovedale. The location is a 500-metre walk west to the platform of the Marshall Railway Station. Given its location, the site is included in the Marshall Station Increased Housing Diversity Area. The site is located in a general residential zone, Schedule 4, which covers the land nominated for the Increased Housing Diversity Area. Land to the west and south of the site is located in a general residential zone, Schedule 1. There are no overlays affecting the subject site or surrounding land. The subject site is rectangular in shape with a frontage to Marshalltown Road of 40.2 metres and depth of 201.7 metres. The site contains a single dwelling and outbuildings on an area of 8,093 square metres. The site is flat and is not affected by any easements. A number of large trees are located generally around the perimeter of the site. Surrounding land is generally developed with single dwellings and outbuildings, with lot sizes varying, albeit significantly smaller than the subject site, except the two lots adjoining the east boundary and opposite. Most lots adjoining to the west and south front and are orientated towards Hewitt Drive and Bradley Place, with secluded private open space generally abutting the subject site. The application seeks approval for the development of 41 dwellings on the site with associated stage subdivision. The development proposes the following dwelling layouts: 4 detached 2-bedroom single-storey dwellings, 37 double-storey dwellings attached in groups of 2 to 6 and comprising 2 4-bedroom, 9 3-bedroom and 26 2-bedroom dwelling types. Car parking will generally be provided as a single garage with tandem space where required. Dwellings 3 to 41 are proposed to be accessed via a central common property driveway and 5.5 metre width vehicle crossing, which would also provide access to 8 visitor car spaces. Dwelling 1 and 2 will have separate driveways and one 6.4 metre wide vehicle crossing on the frontage to Marshalltown Road. The maximum building height would be 7.148 metres. A variety of materials are proposed to external walls, including face brick, render, vertical and horizontal boards, timber cladding, with ground and upper stories generally having different types. Each dwelling includes a variation to portico and or door style. The application includes a subdivision of the development to include individual lots and a common property access way in 4 stages. The lots will range in area from 86 square metres to 273.8 square metres. A large area of communal open space is also proposed in between dwellings 31 and 32. The communal open space will measure approximately 15 metres by 14 metres and will contain 7 of the 8 visitor car parking spaces. The 8th car parking space will be located between dwellings 26 and 27. 8 trees are proposed to be retained along the perimeter of the site. The trees include 7 tuat gums and 1 yellow gum, which are all in fair to good health. A tree protection zone has been applied for all the trees. A condition requiring an appropriate landscape plan is recommended to form part of the permit. A previous application for the construction of 42 dwellings in a staged 42-lot subdivision on the subject site was previously refused by the Planning Committee and was appealed to VCAT by the applicant. Although VCAT upheld Council's decision, this was based on the following. This is an excerpt from the VCAT decision. For these reasons, I consider that the proposed development fails to achieve a key part of the policy framework that applies to the review site. Through the failure to properly identify and protect the appropriate existing trees on the review site, the proposed development has failed to respond to this key part of the existing and preferred neighbourhood character. As such, I consider that I have no option but to refuse to grant a permit for the proposed development. However, in refusing to grant a permit, I note that the fundamentals of the design before me are appropriate for this locality, subject to an appropriate analysis of which of the existing trees should be retained and how the development should be modified to provide for their safe retention. This application provides for the retention and protection of 8 trees and a slightly different layout to provide a large area of communal open space within common property. A review of the vegetation on site via a vegetation assessment, arborist assessment and development impact assessment has been undertaken. Council's Environment Unit and Parks Department have agreed with the conclusions within the reports and require conditions on the permit for a tree protection management plan and tree protection zones. VCAT also considered that the proposal should not be judged or refused on the basis of a density assessment, that the extent of failures to other standards and objectives of Clause 55 were not unreasonable and could easily be addressed by way of permit conditions, and insofar as the proposed arrangement and articulation of the built form is concerned, it is an appropriate response to the interface conditions of the review site. The application was referred to relevant internal and external referral authorities. The authorities responded with no objection, subject to conditions or advice. The application was advertised by way of one sign on site and notices sent to owners and occupiers of adjoining land, including opposite. As a result of advertising, 17 objections were received, with concerns relating to overshadowing, overlooking, vehicle access, car parking, traffic safety, neighbourhood character, proposed density, vegetation retention, waste collection and property values. A consultation meeting was not held due to COVID. However, a response prepared by the applicant was circulated to all objectors. The application has been assessed against the zone and relevant provisions and clauses of the Greater Geelong Planning Scheme. The assessment of the application has found the proposal to be a satisfactory response to the purpose of the zone in relation to providing an increase in dwelling density in a location that offers good access to services and transport. It also supports a diversity in housing design to address identified needs within the community. The proposal responds appropriately to Clause 55 Res Code, and given the subject site is located within the Marshall Station Increased Housing Diversity Area, the development is supported by a combination of policies applying to the land in relation to an increase in dwelling density. The assessment against policy provisions within the planning scheme provides clear support for the development. As mentioned, the site is located within an area of increased housing diversity, which is a marker for expected change in built form, where dwelling design is expected to make more efficient use of sites. The proposal not only receives support from the design objectives within Clause 22.63, it is also supported through policy in relation to infill development. It is considered that the built form proposed is offering an appropriate scale of development to the site, not an under or overdevelopment of the site. It is also responsive to the interface with the adjoining conventional residential area to the west, south and southeast. Only single and double-storey built form is proposed, not three-storey, which is allowable under the zone. The proposal is compliant with the minimum side rear setbacks required under Clause 5504-1, the side and rear setbacks. The dwellings are also spaced apart so that adjoining lots maintain views through the site. Visual bulk is also avoided through a variety of cladding and roof lines, as well as windows. In response to the previous VCAT decision, a review of the vegetation on the site has resulted in the retention and protection of 8 mature gum trees, which will contribute to the character of the area through the retention of the existing tree canopy. A landscape plan is also recommended as a condition of permit that will provide for planting throughout the site, contributing to a better landscape outcome for the site and surrounding area. The application has been assessed against the objectives and standards of Clause 55 of the planning scheme, with variations to only 2 standards required, those being overshadowing of dwelling 11's secluded private open space and some storage provisions. As such, it is recommended that the application is supported subject to conditions.
Well, thank you very much, Tracy. Step 2 now, I'll ask if members of the panel, the committee, have any questions they have of the officers. Nelson?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for that. I do appreciate it. You said about 8 or so minutes ago, it's an area designed for increased development. How many other developments like that are in that particular area?
Question, Councillor Nelson. At number 95 across the road, you'll see that there's 12 units there currently in Marshalltown Road. There's also roughly...
Is that the same density as this then?
Very similar.
That was my question.
Yeah. Similar, but this is more intense in that sense. Yes, but it's very similar, around 230 square metres per unit on that particular block.
How many, so I'll ask the question again, how many developments in that area would match this one at that much density?
Looking at the area, say, with a 200 metre radius, you're looking at about 3 other developments in the area.
Whereabouts are they?
95 is one. The one directly next to 95 too, which is 89, and also the one in Brandon Mews, which is number...
where there's 10. Oh, not 41. Yeah. More than 200 square metres per. I'm just trying to establish that this is an area for that, yet it's never happened before. And because they're all relatively new dwellings in this area, it's not likely to happen again, other than probably a few blocks like this one in question. That was what I'm trying to get at. This zone allows for that, yet it hasn't happened. So, okay, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Maloney?
It's a pretty unique site. Like when you look at the map in front of you, like this is the largest site within 1 kilometre of the Marshall train station. So this is a unique opportunity for this type of development, we would say, based on the other lot sizes in the area. Yes, you're still going to get, your 2, 3, 5, 10 dwellings, but nothing of this size because the size of the site is just huge.
But for the 2 apartments at the front, every other apartment has access and egress in 1 driveway, is that right?
Councillor Maloney.
Just with respect to the car parking, it was mentioned that the communal access in the centre of the development was also filled with 7 car parks. Is that a common occurrence in this type of development?
Yes, it is. They do need to provide visitor parking as part of the car parking requirements. So yes, they're generally, especially something of this size, there is visitor parking provided within the site. Yeah, it's a requirement.
The car parking is the open space component. Is that right? Or no? It's just communal space technically. Sorry.
There is a large area of communal space, which is it could be utilised as an open park area. And part of that is made up with 8 car parking spaces, but the majority of that area is open space that is like parkland.
There might be also some other questions about traffic management, but I just wanted to ask for a comment on as Councillor Nelson mentioned, the increase of traffic and the management of that in the area. Do you think that has been managed well? Proposal?
They did provide a traffic assessment report with the application, which was referred to our traffic department, who had no issues with the increase in traffic generation of the development.
Councillor Maloney. Mason?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wonder if you could please explain a little more about the variations of the two standards in terms of overshadowing?
There are two variations to the standards of res code, which they only affect within the subject site. They don't affect any of the surrounding properties. The first one being there is some overshadowing of secluded private open space of one of the dwellings within the Sorry, I'm just trying to find my notes. I'll move on to the storage objective first. So there's 7 townhouses within the development that have external storage of the minimum requirement, which is 6 cubic metres. And then all of the remaining townhouses actually have that storage internally within their garage. So normally the storage would be provided externally with convenient access from external to the building.
Right. In the meantime, are there any other questions from the council or the committee? Yep, absolutely. I'll just note, in the meantime, it's actually quite difficult to get a proper grasp of these amended plans. There's no actual proper layout in this report in front of us, comparing it to the last one. But Councillor Nelson?
Yep. My question is there a way that we can see the actual plans, the design of the block and where all the units sit on the block? Because I can't see it either on here or in our pack. Yeah, none of us have it. None of us have it, Joe.
We'll email them to you directly.
Just to confirm then, please, officers, in terms of overshadowing and the complaints, I think I heard an answer that it was only internal and there's no external overshadowing. Can you confirm that?
Correct. That is correct.
Thank you.
first of all.
All right, in the meantime then, we'll keep on going with the agenda. Wait for that to come through, and then we may have further questions for officers later at the end. For now, though, I'll open up to hear from objectors and submitters from the audience in this application. I'll ask that everybody who wishes to just put their hand up, and we'll come forward 3 minutes at a time, and I'll work from the front of the room to the back. Ma'am in the green, if you'd like to come forward. If that is green, I apologise. Yes, you second from the back if you'd like to come forward. Yeah, yourself, ma'am, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ma'am, sorry.
Ma'am.
You just state your name, sorry, and then 3 minutes will be yours.
Yeah. My name's Judy Brown. I'm 9 Hewitt Drive. I'm sure the others will cover a few of these objections. One of my objections is under 550501 regarding to encourage the consideration of the needs of people with limited mobility of the design. There is 22 units with their living areas upstairs, so that's more than half the units with disabled people will not be able to, they'll be able to access one bedroom, the bathroom and the garage. So I believe that's infringement of the that code. Also traffic, the traffic report had, I think that would be that area, the intersection of Barwarry Road and Marshalltown Road has been declared and got funding for a black spot upgrade with pedestrian crossings and that. I know there's been 2 major accidents in Marshalltown Road. One lady had to be taken to the Austin Hospital in a helicopter. I believe, I'm not sure, I think she passed away. There was another major accident just in the last year. So traffic consideration is extra traffic coming out into Marshalltown Road is not, as there is only one exit and entrance, that's an issue. 550309, maximum retention on on-street parking with the extra cross road that decreases the on-street parking. With the development this size, there's going to be more and more cars needed to be out in the street. Also, access of emergency vehicles. I'd see on the plans, I think between Unit 39 and Unit 5 and 6, the driveway is only 4.8, including the walkway. I believe if you have a fire, I'm sure there would be at least 2 fire engines that would need to come to put out the fire. I think that's a minimum they would probably send. That would block traffic in and out of the units. Also the bin enclosures. There only looks like there's about 100 mils between each bin, which I know when you put it out in the nature strip, you're meant to leave at least half a metre, and I pity the poor people that have to put in the last couple of bins because it won't fit in. And also with glass recycling, I believe that's meant to be coming in within the next 5 years. At this stage, they're saying there's 2 weekly pickups.
So that's 3 minutes, Judy, if you just 30 seconds, please.
Okay. And also it doesn't the existing character of the neighbourhood. As they say, it's mainly single-storey housing and occasional double-storey, and we believe that this development should be the same, mainly single-storey units. Okay.
Much appreciated. Any other chapters? Someone? Yep. Please come forward. If you can just state your name and then 3 minutes are yours.
Evening. My name's Janet Van Elst and I'm at 100 Marshalltown Road. The length of my property is on the western side of the development. All my living area is on that side of the house. I have 8 large windows, pretty well all windows on that side of the house, and somehow I don't get included in the overshadowing thing, and I can't see how that would be possible. I would definitely be looking at brick walls, so that's my major concern there for myself. The other thing is the whole design of the place doesn't even remotely fit into the area. It'll stand out like a sore thumb. It's not remotely like number 95 Marshalltown Road. They have 12 units, all single storey. The ones up in Brandon Mews, they're quite nicely done. There's 14 units there. And I believe they're having some parking issues out the front of those, although it's a much smaller scale. Around on Station Street, there's units there. There's no end of social issues there because of being how it is. It's just, it's going to cause a lot of problems in our area. Most of us abutting the development have lived there for quite some time since our estate opened up. We've got used to it being a nice, quiet, peaceful area, and that'll all change. We're going to have parking issues, we're going to have noise issues, loud music. It's mostly going to be young people because the living areas are upstairs. It wouldn't suit a lot of elderly people. It'll be no end of neighbourhood disputes and problems, and particularly with parking on Marshalltown Road. There's not enough parking in the development. They've only got tandem car parks, and they're not going to want to shift one car while they get the other car out. They're going to be parking on the street, and there's not much of that there. So I just say it's going to cause a heck of a lot of social issues in our area when it's an area that we're quite used to it being quite lovely, nice neighbours, and quiet and peaceful. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Just wait a second so Cass can wipe down the desk. Please do come forward. Yes, just.
I'm Dawn Master. I'm at 130 Barwarry Road, Marshall. There is far too many units on 2 acres. Cut it down to about 30, yes. We're not objecting to the development. We are objecting to the units. It's not going to be kept in character to the area. We have been there for 65 years, as you can see my age. It's a stress level now, let alone mental health issues, social issues, arguments, isolation, people with their car problems, health and safety, ambulance, trucks, garbos, deliveries, and sunlight. And with the common road down the middle...
Dawn, please, you're addressing me.
Sorry, I thought I was... The common road down the middle is 201 metres long. I was on a farm. I didn't have to go that far to the end and come back again. I could get with a big wide space. The traffic hazard is terrible. Barwarry Road, Hewitt Drive, we all come into Marshalltown Road, and there's a common road in the middle. How on earth is everybody going to go into Marshalltown Road? For the children going past to school, for myself as an elderly person, I do use the wheelie frame because of my health issues, and it is dangerous anyway, going down Marshalltown Road. I don't know, common sense is out the window. It's not suitable in this area, in this neighbourhood, and it's going to take 6 years to finish in 4 stages, they tell us. Would you like this in your home if you were living there? Thank you. Near your home.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Paula Bumstead. I live at 96 Marshalltown Road, and I'm here for the trees. The trees on that property are the character of the neighbourhood. 95 Marshalltown Road didn't have any gums or cypress, so they didn't need a permit. I'll also like to bring to the attention of the Geelong City Council your own tree management policy defines a canopy tree with spreading branches greater than 6 metres at height in maturity. All strategic development and construction work within the municipality is required to consider trees as early as possible in the design of the project to ensure the protection of the existing trees and alignment of the urban forest strategy and sustainability framework. I'm not sure what's happened here, but clearly in this development design, all the trees have 6 trees have been retained. The far left-hand side corner of the development, up the very back, and 2 down the left-hand side of the driveway. I'll also like to show you a photo in Bailey Street, Grovedale. 8 units, all the trees retained on the left-hand side of the development, corner of Marshalltown Road and Marshalltown Road and Barwarry Road. Power core cut through that gum tree because the leaves were encroaching on the power lines. They retained the tree. A footpath in Barwarry Road that went in, trees were retained. They actually protected those trees. Another development on the corner of Sutalo Street and Grove Road, development went around the trees. There was also a Victorian native species that was identified on the block. The Arborist Report in 2018 in April, and before May the 2nd, 2018, where the council must have flown over, that tree was removed, so it would have required a permit for this development to go on ahead. The tree's removed, hence why they've designed that development, because the tree's no longer there. All of these trees are to be removed. I would like to leave those photos. They were stunning trees, beautiful trees, full of birds. I'm a crazy bird lady. All these trees gone, all of them. These 2 beautiful big trees up the front, they're over 50 years old. Most of these trees are over 50 years old, over 18 metres in height. All gone. There's the natural canopy on Hewitt Drive. You can see it. 2 of those trees are to be retained within the car park. All those gone. This photo was taken in my backyard 3 weeks ago. That's the Gang cockatoo. Gang cockatoo will be officially listed as an endangered species after large decline in its numbers due to the climate crisis and bushfires and removal of its natural habitat. Every year these birds come to these trees. They feed and they rest on their migration. These trees go... I'm not sure what's going to happen to those birds. Anyway, that's my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paula. Cass, could you grab those photos? And we've got some questions with you as well. I'll go to Councillor Nelson first, then around. Oh, sorry.
Oh, and these, sorry.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just, to the officers, the belief that the trees are going to be removed from this site, can we just confirm? My understanding is no, but can you confirm that?
There was an extensive arborist report and tree assessment, and out of the trees on the site, 12 were recommended to be retained, and they are retaining 8 of the trees on the site.
How many is that's being removed from the site?
Sorry?
How many will be removed from the site?
There's 88 were determined, were identified on the site, and all but 8 will be removed.
I'm sorry, I can't quite understand it. 88 trees, did you say?
Yes.
At present, there's 88 trees on the site?
That's what was in the arborist report. There were 88 that they identified when that was done. I'm not sure what is left on the site now.
I'm none the wiser. I don't know.
And Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you. My question is probably along similar lines, but do we have any indication from the VCAT ruling what they've, did they give any guidance on how many trees should be retained, or what they felt would be an acceptable outcome if the plans were revised in terms of tree retention, given that was the basis of their decision?
They didn't give any direct indication as to how many should be retained. There are some... During the VCAT appeal, there was some expert evidence given by a town planner who was proposing that there were 12 trees that were to be retained. However, the applicant then confirmed later during the hearing that there were only 4, and VCAT did state that that the retention of the trees should be based on a balance between retaining trees that are worthy of retention and enabling development on the site, but no specific number was suggested to be retained.
Sorry, just to clarify, you said before that there was an arborist report that recommended 12 of them be retained, and in this proposal there are 8.
8. The 4 that they're not retaining, there's 2 that will be... Actually, there's 3 where the structural root zone will be severely impacted from the development, and one of those trees also has stunted growth and poor wounds and that to the structure of the tree.
Councillor Mason.
Just to follow on with the trees, were there any offsets required for the other trees that were cleared?
No, the Arborist report has found that there's no requirement under 5217 for the removal of the trees, as they are planted and none of them are native.
And just following on, I think you've stated a fact that there were 12 trees and 4 were removed. Is there an explanation why the 4 were removed in the middle of perhaps the planning and negotiation of this?
I'm not sure if they have already been removed. I don't know.
I'm still unclear then whether or not those trees exist.
It's something, Councillor Mason, you can ask the applicant. It's our understanding that 12 trees are still there, but we'd need clarification from the applicant.
All right. Further submitters, please. Welcome, sir. If we just have your name and then the 3 minutes are yours.
Kevin McMaster. I live at 130 Barwarry Road, and I would like to speak about the density of the buildings and the common access way. The IHDA area objectives include the intensity of redevelopment will be highest around the activity centre core and lower at the edge of the IHDA. I may mention the Marshall Precinct Structure Plan, first drafted, produced in 2019, includes the development at 98 Marshalltown Road. The structure plan shows that the development site is outside the declared 400 metre walkable catchment area of the railway station. The residential development yield table indicates an average density of 50 for the station precinct, 30 for the walkable catchment, and 20 for the wider precinct. The council has used the City of Greater Geelong Housing Diversity Strategy as a guide and not merely as a reference, as did VCAT. This is the same development which I am making an objection to in the planning permit, and an average number of 30 equates to 24 units for 2 acres and not 42. I'm objecting to a high density development away from the centre of activity and right on the edge of a general residential area. I would like to mention the point that there is nowhere in the IHDA at the moment that qualifies as heavy density by the scales in the housing diversity strategy. I would mention the common access way and crossover with 62 car spaces and Lord knows how many bikes on site, plus delivery vehicles, tradies and emergency vehicles, numerous pedestrians. There would be some extra precautions to safeguard pedestrians. This is, after all, a 200 metre common access way, a dead-end street with varying widths and only a delineation to protect pedestrians. The common access way has a maximum width of 4.8 metres and a few passing stations. But I have visited several similar access ways in Armstrong Creek, Warralilly and Chalmont. These developments have common access ways between 7 and 10 metres in width. There will be more traffic using this common access way and crossover than many no-through roads, courts and lanes within the whole neighbourhood.
Kevin, that's 3 minutes. Could you please summarise in the next 30 seconds the rest of your points? Thank you. Thank you. Please.
Amy McMaster, vested interest from 130 Barwarry Road, or Grovedale. I am a school teacher and just wondering on the safety issue for the Marshalltown Road. You've got the school 500 metres to the opposite way to the train station, but there's only one side of the street the kids can walk on and commute on, and that's the side that this development is actually happening. We've already witnessed a death in the street not too long ago from someone, very unfortunate, but this driveway is going to be impacting these kids that walk to school, the pedestrians. The other thing is that they talked about the corner of the intersection being 36 metres away. Well, that's now changed because they've put raised platforms for pedestrians to cross, so cars actually have to pull up 10 metres the other side of that 36 metres, or they've only got 26 metres rather than the 36 metres that they were talking about. So it's a real safety issue for the kids. And the other one, that with the parking in particular, I have driven down there a couple of times at night, cannot get a park in any of the streets around the side. During the day, you won't see a car there because obviously all the people go off to work. So the car parking is an absolute extreme. And just on the car parking, the problem that we have is a unit that is double-storey. Well, no oldie's going to live in this unit that's double-storey. They're not going to have cars. They won't live there. But young people, they'll live there, but they'll have a car. They might have a second car. Their girlfriend will have a car. You've got 4 cars in one place. It's just not going to fit. The numbers stack up with the cars. If you did some numbers on it, you'd have over 150 cars. You wouldn't fit them on the 2 acres as it is. It's a massive density with all those houses there. And just the other thing, what was the other thing? I had some notes here. The traffic report. When the traffic report was done, it was done on the 22nd of the 4th in 2020. Right in the middle of the coronavirus. Nobody could go to work. No one was driving anywhere. Yet we can't now find the traffic report online. But the traffic report just doesn't work for that particular time because it was the coronavirus. The latest stats that we did it on a school day, there were 14 pedestrians. It was a non-school day. There was 660 vehicles in 75 minutes, 9 cars per minute. It's just a massive thing for the community.
Thank you, Damien.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any further objectors or submitters to come forth in this matter?
My name is Jim Fowler. I live at 19 Hewitt Drive, and I'm here to object. For a start off, they've been saying 41 units, but there is actually 43 units because there's 2 houses on the block already. Are they going to demolish those houses, or do they stay there? And 2, I walk around Bradley Place every day. Night time, there's up to 10 cars. It's 18 units in that lot there. There's 10 cars in Bradley Place every night. Now, on that same basis, it's got 3 times as many, so there's going to be 30 cars outside that every night. It's the bus route. It services the station. When the station is out of order, the trains are out of order, the buses run there to the station. Not only our buses, but the buses that go to Melbourne. Now, Marshalltown Road's not getting any less traffic on because it's a through road now, and they've put a bigger roundabout on the Bowen Heads Road. Bowen Heads Road up to there is just a massive traffic. You see the Bailey Street roundabout, you take your life in your hands to go there because traffic's coming from all the industrial area, all the through traffic from Bowen Heads to go to Highton, or mainly to go up to Highton and mainly through there. But I think that it's going to be like a ghetto there, and I think it'll be a disgrace if council pass it because there's no business case for it, and I believe that it's just mass money grab. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Are there any last submitters for this application? I'll now invite the applicant or their representative to come up and to address the committee. Please.
Councillor Sullivan, thanks for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the permit applicant. My name is Brendan O'Lone. We're for St Quintin Local Consultancy in Geelong. As I said, representing the permit applicant for this application, 320-2021. Now, I think it's probably pertinent for me to start about the vegetation. I think that's probably where the most questions are going to come. Look, the vegetation on the site, be direct here, we don't actually need to get a permit to remove any of this vegetation as it stands right now, because all the vegetation is either non-native or planted vegetation. So as it stands, and as Tracy was saying, under 5217, there is no permit trigger. And I think naively we went into the previous VCAT hearing, and that was our argument, saying, oh, it doesn't require a permit trigger, therefore we're going to remove it and replace it with Indigenous landscaping. And unfortunately for my client's sake, the tribunal member had a different line of thinking, saying that we should be respecting the what is the landscape vegetation on site. And so we took that on the chin, to be honest, and we've come back. Now, there's been 2 arborist reports done. The first one was part of the first application. Now, 85 or so trees, nearly all of them are of poor health, and I have that arborist report here, and if the council wants to have a look down the column, the comment column, basically, I'd say 95% of the trees are the arborist has decided they're in really poor condition and shouldn't be there. And now the most of the vegetation is either Indigenous or tuat gums, and the tuat gum is actually Indigenous to WA and not Geelong. So it's clear that it's been planted. And so we got to a point after the VCAT hearing and the refusal there that we identified the best trees out of that original arborist report. Now, there was 12 trees that had the comment of fair. Now, if you've seen arborist reports, they generally, the highest level is significant, good, fair, poor. Now, we had, out of all those 85, sorry, I'll just get the correct number, 88 trees, we only had 12 that were considered to be fair. And so we got a second arborist to peer review those 12 trees. And in that peer review, the second arborist considered that 9 were satisfactory, and though he didn't recommend that they should be retained, because that wasn't really the scope of his report. His scope was to assess it and to determine whether they were of good health, and he considered that 9 were. Now, there are three trees that he considered weren't. So in effect, he's peer reviewed the first arborist report, and he said, look, these probably aren't good enough. And his comments were large dead wood, for tree 85, large dead wood, including bark bifurcation, basal damage, boral damage, and acute branch unions. So he's considered those 3 trees to be not worthy of keeping. There was 1 additional tree, so there's 9 trees, and as you have heard, we're going to try and keep 8. Now, all these trees are 8 to 14 metres high, and so they will be still seen from Marshalltown Road in the community. I think 8 to 14 metres, quite high. I think it's a good size canopy. They're fair trees, and we've incorporated them into the application, into the development. And we're going to provide a landscape plan, so there's going to be native vegetation, more appropriate vegetation for every single townhouse, and within the communal open space as well. I understand what the objectors are saying, and you know, the trees are there and they're nice to look at, but really they're just not in the right location. So we are trying to do better in that regard. So that's my little few minutes worth about the landscape. The existing trees. Now there's some comments about the higher density from Councillor Nelson. Now I do accept that this is a bit higher. This is higher density than what's around, but those previous sites were developed 5 to 10 years ago, probably 10 years ago. Now, things have really changed in 2022, and back in 2010, 2012, there wasn't such a demand for unit development because house prices were so cheap. You could buy a house in Geelong in 2010, you could pick something up for $200,000 or $180,000. That's just not the case in existing urban Geelong now. You're going to be paying $800,000 to $1 million. So the fact that we're having to increase the density is to provide a supply, to provide a market who really needs something now. And you'll see it, council's seeing it now, their application are skyrocketing because people see the value in subdividing their properties, 2-lot, 3-lot subdivisions, because people were demanding that. 10 years ago, they didn't see that we didn't need to subdivide because houses were so cheap, existing housing stock was cheap in Geelong. And the same thing you see in Armstrong Creek. When that first started being developed, they were 5 to 550 square metre lots, and that's fine. But now, the applications that are being lodged to council, you'll see that 300 to 350 metre square blocks, because people are demanding smaller blocks. It affects the affordability, and people don't want as much land to maintain. And there's been a few issues, questions about the traffic, and look, we had a traffic report done by a qualified traffic engineer, and council engineers have also reviewed it. VCAT's also supported the traffic impact assessment. What happens is at the exit point, a car can enter the site whilst a car can be waiting to exit. So there's sufficient room at that point that car can enter and exit, and there can be some additional cars waiting to exit also. I don't want to overstate the traffic issue. I think Marshalltown Road is a significant road, arterial road for Geelong, and I just don't think that the 42 units are really going to have a massive impact on the traffic. And the car parking, there's 2 car spaces per townhouse. They are tandem, but I also lived in a tandem sort of thing with my wife in the early days, and it's not such an impact on us to move one car to get the other. And there's significant visitor parking. Look, we just think this area, 300 metres to the Grovedale kind of employment precinct, and it's, I think Tracy said 500 metres walkable to the Marshalltown train station. There's primary schools, aged care, public open space. There's other medium density in the area. This is just a large underutilised site, and we just think it's perfect for this for medium density lots. Council's own settlement strategy, they talk about reducing growth in Ballerine townships, and that's great. We want to protect those townships, and they want a direct growth. Council wants a direct growth in the northwest and Armstrong Creek, but it also talks about infill development as needed. And in 2022, there is such a demand for these sort of small townhouses, and I think if we went for something with less density, then there's an opportunity that council officers may have come back to us and said, "You're underdeveloping this, really excellent opportunity here. Increase your density." So that's what we've done. We're not going to be perfect to everybody, but we've tried to find a balance that it's not going to have huge impacts, and we're going to be able to provide a product that will be in demand by the community. And from 2020, I think there's been a real shift in the community expectations, and that's been shown by the recent federal elections, that there's more of a social conscience now, I think, from the community and the young people who are voting, and there's climate change and cost of housing, and I know we have an obligation to listen to the objectives, but we've also need to be a voice for the future owners of these properties who don't currently have a voice. I just went to a recent, I'm almost finished, I've only got a couple of more paragraphs, but I went to a recent UDIA meeting, and they talked about how Geelong's got a real shortage of skilled workers who are TAFE trained, so that's our mechanics, hairdressers, aged care nurses, plumbers, carpenters, and their conclusion was that there's not enough housing stock for these people to live in, and they don't necessarily want to go to Armstrong Creek or northwest growth areas when that's available. They need something to rent now, and there's just not housing stock, and therefore they're taking their jobs elsewhere.
That was 2 minutes. If you'd like to wrap up, please, sir. Just 30 seconds.
Yeah. I just think these townhouses provide a great opportunity to house 41 groups, families, singles, couples, share house, whatever it could be. And I know there may be some perceived minor impacts to some objectives, but I think there's only one really correct decision here is to adopt the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done on your presentation. It's the first time I've had anybody invoke a federal election in a planning committee, so that was quite interesting. I will now throw to the committee for questions of the applicant. Councillor Mason. Murray, sorry. My apologies.
Thanks for that presentation. I agree with a lot of what you say, and I can see why you say it. Can you, when this first went to this planning committee the first time, and then to VCAT, how many trees were to be retained on the property?
The answer was 0 trees to be retained initially when it went to council, and then once it went to the tribunal, we decided to try and retain 4. So that answers your question.
Okay, so the VCAT have made a decision on what you said you were going to retain 4 trees, correct? Yep.
I think there was a little bit of confusion at the VCAT hearing about which trees, and I think that was the reason the tribunal was a little bit off balance and they decided not to support it. It was probably because the 4 trees were not the most significant trees. The 4 trees that were retained for VCAT, for the purposes of VCAT, were the 4 trees that were most suited around the development. So therefore, VCAT thought, well, you haven't really made a conscious effort to retain the best trees. All you've done is retain the trees that fit in with your development. And we accepted that, took it on the chin. So that's why we've come back and looked, started from scratch and looked at what are the 12, well, what are the best trees? And that's where we come to the number of 12.
And so just to follow on from that, sorry. Because this is what I'll be basing my decision on, because we've been given an excerpt from the VCAT decision, and in reading it, and it's been read to this, I note the fundamentals of the design before me are appropriate for this locality, being the units and the numbers. So I get that. Subject to an appropriate analysis of which of the existing trees should be retained. Does that exist? An appropriate analysis of which existing trees should be retained? Because the applicant is going to retain 8, but has planning or has anyone done an appropriate analysis of which existing trees should be retained? Does that exist at all?
Well, that would be in the form of the Arborist Report, which our internal departments have reviewed and have agreed with the recommendations of that report.
Sorry, but doesn't an Arborist Report say which are satisfactory to, about the condition of the trees? I mean, we haven't seen an Arborist Report, so we haven't got it here. So doesn't an arborist report say, and the applicant has said, identified 12 as fair, then another arborist said there's 9 satisfactory, 3 that are unsatisfactory. Does it go further than that? Grey area, isn't it?
The Arborist reports are very detailed, and it's a great question, Councillor Murray, and I hope we can answer it. As it's been described, there's 2 Arborist reports here, and they've been assessed by our Environment Department. In those Arborist reports, they've gone in and looked, as it's been said, at the type of tree, the species, the genus, where it sits in its status in terms of poor, fair, it's been described by the applicant. And ultimately it's come up with 12. Ideally, as a council, we would like to see all 12 retained because they are more of the significant trees. So the analysis that's been done has determined that of those 88 trees, you have 76 trees that are in very poor condition or a threatening condition. They're diseased, they've got trunks that aren't safe in some areas. So we're now looking at the 12 trees that have been there. We've only read the VCAT decision. Myself and Tracy were not at that VCAT hearing. Brendan, I believe, may have been at that VCAT hearing. He might be able to talk to that a bit more. Senior member Dryden, who was the member, has been a member at VCAT for over 10 years. His comments have just said that they need to do more to retain the significant number of trees. So we can only take the analysis that there are 12 significant trees, as member Dryden indicated, and 8 of those are being kept. And then the 4 trees that are being removed have been discussed a little bit in that detail. And that's a fair question to base your decision on.
Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you. And I'll direct my questions, I think, initially to the applicants, but the officers might be able to provide information. In the original application or that went before VCAT, you said there were 4 trees that that were retained in those plans. What was the location? How does the location of those trees compare to what is in these plans? Are any of them the same?
Great question, because I don't actually have that original application in front of me. What I can say is that, as I was trying to explain to Councillor Murray, was that as we went to the tribunal, we already had our development set, and instead of doing a focus assessment on the trees, we chose the trees that suited our development. And I guess to answer your question, maybe there was 1 or 2 of the trees did overlap, and but I think that probably the more significant question was that there wasn't I don't think there was a good enough assessment at that stage at VCAT to say that these are the best trees to be retained. Now, there's a lot of trees on the site, and it does have some character, but as John Rush was saying, that they are in poor health, and it's not a great decision to keep these trees if they're not going to last the test of time. We're better off planting indigenous to the area, indigenous trees that are indigenous to the area that are going to last a lifetime. But we just going back a step, instead of just picking the best trees to suit our development, we went back to square one, and we decided we had this report done by the arborist, and we went through it with the arborist, and we identified all of the trees that were sound or fair to be retained. That would continue to grow on the site, and we came out at only 12 out of 87. So we had 12. That was right, let's try and develop something around these 12 trees. Then we thought, let's get a peer review. That was for only purpose was to show the council that we're doing our best here to retain the best trees. And the other arborist decided out of those 12, 9 were satisfactory. And he thought, look, we've ended up with 8 because one wasn't quite working because they were right next to each other. We couldn't quite get it to work. So that's where we ended up with 9. But they're 8 to 14 metres high, really you can see the canopies from the road, and it will make I think it will make quite a nice contrast with the proposed landscaping, indigenous landscaping. To have a couple of large canopy trees that suit the site, I think it will make a really good outcome.
From those reports, none of those trees were towards the Marshalltown Road end of the development. There was nothing that could be retained.
Trees that were towards the Marshalltown there was a lot of cypress trees, and it's been landscaped garden in front of that house, so they're really not appropriate tree to have in this environment. So they were the first to so there was quite a few native trees to Australia, as I was saying, the tuart gum, which is WA indigenous, and then the rest were made up with non-native cypress trees. So we decided not to keep those.
The type of tree rather than the health of the trees, or
the. Well, I can have a look. I mean, the cypress trees. I mean, they range in their health from good to poor, and some of the callistemons also from good to poor, but just not really appropriate for this area. Not helping the ecology, any bird life. They're not assisting in that matter. Also, with this development being quite narrow, we needed to have a central driveway, and so any of those trees that were going to be impacted, and they were, as I was saying, non-native, they were going to be impacted by the central driveway, which is the only way we could develop this site.
Mr. Mason.
Look, I still have a problem understanding this. You've gone ahead, is it right? You've gone ahead and removed some trees, yet the decision is not yet made whether the development will go ahead. Is that right?
I was just speaking to my client, the applicant, and no trees have been removed. Look, I think one tree was removed 4 or 5 years ago, but that was well before the original application, VCAT. But no trees have been removed since.
So how many trees exist at the moment?
87.
So I think one of the objectors said that a lot of trees have been removed. I still don't understand what's being said here. You say there have been no trees removed.
Not since the Arborist reports have been done. Perhaps the question needs to be asked of the person who said that, because we're not aware of any trees being removed. Certainly any significant trees. Yeah.
Thank you.
May I say one tree?
I apologise, sir, we're not taking comments from the gallery at this time. He's the applicant. This is our time for questioning the applicant and their representative as are the two members talking. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Chair. I guess for me there's two issues. One is the trees, obviously. I live in Highton and there's a lot of big blocks up there, not as big as this. And as soon as the developer buys the house, they push the house over and they cut all the trees down. That's the first thing they do, because you're allowed to do what you want on your own piece of land. And I think the developer in this case is unlucky that they didn't come and rip all the trees down, because they were well within their right to do so. But that's good for the people of Grovedale, and good for the trees, obviously. That's too close to my face. The other one that I have a concern with is you said, it's Brendan, isn't it, Brendan? You said that your application initially was for 44? Was that 42? And then you went on to say that officers encourage you to make 42. Was the original application actually less, and the officers said you should do more, or is that not right?
The original application was for 42. We didn't have any comments from council suggesting that we should increase or decrease. The tribunal member, in the paragraph that you've heard Tracy speak to, and suggested that the density was quite right. I think my comment maybe that you're referring to was we were a little bit nervous as a project team to reduce the density after the VCAT comments came back. And we were a bit nervous because we thought council may come back and say your density is not high enough based on the VCAT tribunal. You should be, this is a great opportunity, a great site, you should be increasing. So I guess to answer your question, we didn't have any comment between the VCAT hearing ruling coming out and lodging the application.
As a councillor, you hear a lot of things with regard to what's happening and what's actually happening, and it's obvious from what the residents are saying, they think that 30 would be a better number. I'm hearing, I heard that, this is what I hear, that the original application was for 30, but council officers said, no, you need to put more on there. That's not the case? Okay, I'm just checking. That's what I heard. So I'm just making sure that if that's the case, but that's not, that's okay. Okay.
Everybody please, speaking in turn. Thank you. Any other councillors have any comments of Councillor Mason?
I've got one further question, please. I've heard a lot of objections from people tonight. I don't know who to ask. I think some of the officers weren't at VCAT, but I'm just trying to establish whether these questions were also asked at VCAT last time, because VCAT has basically come back and stated that the development is acceptable, except for various things. That's why we focused on the trees for a moment. Am I missing something there? I have a comment from the officers, please.
I know you're correct in saying that a VCAT did consider that the density and the overall development was appropriate for the site.
So these community people were represented at that VCAT?
The council representatives.
Council representatives?
Yeah. I don't know if any of the objectors were represented at VCAT. Yeah, council officers were represented.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that there were only two parties at the VCAT. At VCAT, that was the applicant and the council. There was no objectors.
Council was an objector at that hearing.
Yes, understand that.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Any further questions on the committee? Thank you, Brendan. I know opens up for discussion. Any points, any comments that the committee members would like to make? If none further, I'll ask a committee member to put forth a recommendation. Are there any to be had? Councillor Nelson, do you recommend?
An alternate recommendation.
Thank you.
Please.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Maloney? Councillor Nelson, please.
Make it bigger, Mr. Chair, because I didn't bring my glasses. I'd like to move an alternate recommendation that the responsible authority, having considered all matters which the Planning and Environment Act 1987 requires it to consider, decides to refuse to grant a planning permit for the construction of multiple dwellings 41 and staged multi-lot subdivision at 98 Marshalltown Road, Grovedale, on the following grounds. Number one, the proposed development is considered to be an overdevelopment of the site as the dwelling density is excessive in the area and inconsistent with the objectives of Clause 21.06-5, Urban Consolidation, and Council's Housing Diversity Strategy 2007, noting that the site is located on the edge of an increased housing diversity area. Two, the proposal is contrary to the purpose of the general res zone and objectives on clause 22.63, increase housing diversity area, and does not respect the neighbourhood character of the area. It does not provide a satisfactory transition in the scale of development with the adjoining interface lots, and does not provide a high level of on-site amenity for future residents. I'll get there. 3, the proposed fails to meet the following standards and objectives in clause 55. A, clause 55.02-1 of neighbourhood character. B, clause 55.05-5 solar access to open space. Clause 55.05-5 of storage. And D, clause 55.06-1 of design detail. And 4, the proposal in regard as contrary to objectives of clause 52-0.06, car parking, as it will generate an unreasonable amount of vehicle movements in Marshalltown Road and surrounding areas, fails to provide significant pedestrian access.
Mr. Nelson, do you wish to speak to your recommendation further?
I will. As I said before, I just think that it's probably the first larger scale development in the area, and I guess you're a victim of your own success in getting that block, I guess, because I think I've been to that site many times. I used to frequent the train station many times and have parked out the front of that house many times to go to the train station. So I can't support that much development. You're saying that we need that much development. I don't think that that's the case. I think if people want to live in a small townhouse, they'll go to Armstrong Creek. It's only 5 minutes away or 10 minutes away, and there's another growth zone happening in the north of Geelong, the northwest of Geelong. I just think that large-scale development is not Geelong. I think that's Melbourne, and I don't think it's in keeping with the area that are around there. Even the aged care facility on Barwarry Road that I've been to many times, the one that's owned by Genu, it's not that level of development. I think that's even less dense than this one. Other than that, I think if it goes to VCAT, it goes to VCAT. I also note that the state member has put out a petition at the moment, and he's calling on people to have increased garden space, open garden space, and this being a state election, he's focused on that quite heavily. So I think you might have some trouble with that because, as you've heard from the gallery, people want their green space, and they don't want to be in units that are right beside each other and no green space whatsoever. So I know you've said that there is some there, but I don't think it's enough. I'll leave it at that.
Nelson. Councillor Maloney, you wish to make comment?
Thank you. I just appreciate all the parties that have come and spoke tonight. It's a bit of a trek in to do so. I also wanted to thank the resident who provided the photos as well. I think that it's an interesting time to be alive when we're talking about growth, humanity in itself, and also the dwindling populations of species, whether they're native or not, tree-wise, gang cockatoos, all of that sort of stuff. We regularly have this pass by us as councillors, but it is one thing for us to have it in our hands as to what we should do with it. I do commend infill and development in a respectful way, and I find it's really quite hard to find a balance, so I completely relate and understand that notion. However, I do have grave concerns for the traffic in that area, and that cites some concerns for me and certainly for a City Works team for future discussion, that we will have to, as a council, work to mitigate that and the potential risks that are going to come from urban development. So I also wanted to flag that there was a bit of assumption in some of the dialogue tonight. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but council don't see either way whether or not we're going to slap someone on the wrist for decreasing the density. That's just not something that I think is a discourse that we have. We work within regulations and planning controls. So thank you everyone who's come in to to voice their concerns because they're really valuable to us. Thanks.
Maloney. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to speak against the recommendation that's been put forward. But in saying that, I understand all the objections and the points of view, you know, and what's been brought up in relation to traffic, parking, the density, overshadowing, amongst other things. But this is what would have been discussed, and it has been discussed at the last planning permit that this application was before us, and then went to VCAT, and the VCAT made a decision. And the VCAT's decision was, however, in refusing to grant a permit, I note that the fundamentals of the design before me are appropriate for this locality. So, our hands are tied. That's just my opinion. Our hands are tied in relation to this decision. But the trees are another matter. And I think the decision made by VCAT last time was everything else is okay except the trees. That's what I read about that decision. And so I'm basing my decision on what's happened with the trees. And quite fairly, I think it's been put before us that 2 arborist reports have been done, identified the best trees and retaining 8, plus also part of, if the permit was granted, the landscape, a new landscape plan with natives. So there's, you know, I think we're in a difficult position here. I find these difficult at times. This is another tough one tonight, but I'm speaking against the recommendation.
All right. Any of the councillors wish to comment? Councillor Mason.
Excuse me. I am having some difficulty with this because I hear the grief of the community about higher density development. Nevertheless, it's still the case that the rules exist and VCAT has made a decision. And we also have to consider our credibility in the light of sending things to VCAT about things that they've already decided. I was quite concerned. I'm very concerned about people who, or anybody, who might remove vegetation thinking it's a good idea to remove it before they put in their applications, etc. However, I think we've established that that has not been the case in this case. I understand that future development needs to have higher density dwellings in various areas, especially where there is proximity to transport. So, all in all, I think that I've reached a point that I have to support Councillor Murray in this case and object to the motion.
Councillor Mason. Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you. This is a really difficult one. I have no issue, you know, as Councillor Murray and Councillor Mason have said, you know, that we have direction really around the density here, and we do have, you know, we have a serious issue around housing affordability and availability, and you know, we need more density like this. It's an appropriate area. It's close to services. I understand that that's difficult for people who are already in the neighbourhoods because that change in density is challenging, and particularly on these borders of the higher density zones. My issue really is around the trees, because that's where that's what the VCAT decision seems to be based on, and unfortunately, it's not entirely clear what they expected in terms of tree retention and what would be defined as providing. It seems to have been made on a neighbourhood character basis. There are a large number of trees that I'm looking at here around the perimeter of this site that will be removed, particularly towards Marshalltown Road. We've heard that although I guess there's just a bit of there's some lack of clarity around exactly what is expected here, what would satisfy a VCAT with respect to tree retention and neighbourhood character. There were some answers around some of the trees being in good condition that are being removed, but because of the type of species they are, and I understand that they're not natives, but they may add to the neighbourhood character nonetheless, if they're established trees. So, and they're all being removed. So I do wonder whether more effort could have been made to retain, reducing the scale along the perimeter of the development to retain some of those trees that sound like they were in good health, but maybe aren't necessarily the type, and maybe aim to replace them gradually over time. I don't know, come up with another plan. But I do have concerns around the vegetation, and that makes it difficult because the alternate recommendation that's been put up has a number of different aspects to it, but the main one that I'd be supporting is the neighbourhood character one, on the basis that I do feel perhaps some, that there may have been some more attention, more information provided around, and more effort maybe to retain more trees on that site. So I think, on balance, given that's the main point of contention, I'll be supporting the alternate recommendation before us, but it's really on the grounds around the trees.
Councillor Mansfield. With that, I will be putting Councillor Nelson's alternate recommendation to the vote. Oh, you don't get to close actually. In this one. I'll give you the opportunity if you wish, but it's not standard procedure.
Thanks, Chair. I was under the impression that I was allowed to close, but thanks for allowing me to do this. There's a development, a house up in Warm Ponds called Charlemont, and that house, the planners know that house quite well, I'm assuming, and that has a ginormous tree out the front, and it's a Norfolk pine. Obviously, it's not from the area, but that tree is to be retained because of its significance. So I'm not sure whether a gang cockatoo knows whether a tree is from Perth or not. It nests in there because it knows the tree. I don't think we're not sending this back to VCAT. It's not up to us. That's not what the process is. The process is what we have in front of us, and we vote on that on merit. It has nothing to do with VCAT whatsoever. It's up to the applicant what they choose to do with it. And with the current political environment, with the state member saying he has a petition out which says what protections will remain to protect green space and neighbourhood character in areas that impact by this amendment. So I'd have to agree with him 100%. We're eroding that neighbourhood character, and that's why I move the alternate recommendation. Thanks.
Nelson. All right, with that, I'll put your alternate recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? The alternate recommendation is carried. Thank you. All right, we'll take 2 minutes before we consider the next item on the agenda. Item PP 1512-2020-149 Bellarine Highway, Newcombe. Procedures will be same as the last item, so we'll get straight into it. The officer we'll be hearing first is Lewis, I believe. Thanks, mate. Lewis, the floor is yours. Have at it.
Yeah. Can I just confirm, I believe everyone's been sent a copy of the plans. There's also some plans in the report as well, if it makes it easier as well. Hey. Thanks, everyone. So this application seeks a permit for the use and development of the land for a service station, food and drink premises, being a convenience restaurant and car wash, as well as alteration of access to a road in a transport zone 2, and that being the Bellarine Highway. So there's 3 main components to the proposal. That is the service station, the convenience restaurant and the car wash. The service station is proposed to be sited within the southern area of the subject land, with vehicle access available from both Bellarine Highway and Coppards Road. The access from the Bellarine Highway would be an entrance only, and exiting the site would only be available to Coppards Road. The service station building would be set back approximately 13 metres from the Bellarine Highway frontage. It would exhibit a 3 metre setback from the common boundary with number 147 to the west. And the service station building would be a single-storey building with a hipped roof design and external materials of face brickwork, render, and a tiled roof. Over the fuel pump area, there would be a roof canopy, a flat roof canopy, with a maximum height of 6.7 metres, and this structure would also be set back approximately 13 metres from the Bellarine Highway. It would have a side setback to Coppards Road of 5.5 metres. The convenience restaurant building would be adjacent to the northern side of the service station, located centrally within the site. This building would present and would have vehicle access available from Coppards Road. It would be set back 12 metres from Coppards Road and 8 metres from the western side boundary. The building would be constructed of flat roof design with projecting timber-clad parapet walls and a projecting awning. The external finishes of the building are shown on the proposed plans to be rendered. Car parking serving the convenience restaurant would be available to the south and east of this building. A single drive-through lane would be situated adjacent the western and northern elevations of the building, with an exit-only crossover from the drive-through, providing egress from the site to Coppards Road. The convenience restaurant is proposed to operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a maximum patron capacity of 36. The proposed car wash would be sited within the northern area of the application site. This building would comprise an office area, a plant room, and 4 undercover wash bays. Vehicle access adjacent the western side boundary would provide access to the car wash from the central part of the application site. 3 car parks would service the car wash on the northern side of the building. The car wash building itself would be constructed of rendered blockwork with a gabled metal roof, sited approximately 4 metres from the Coppards Road frontage, 15 metres from the northern rear boundary and 9 metres from the western side boundary. The operating hours of the car wash are proposed to be 7 a.m. to 6 p.m, 7 days a week. And I also should just add that the operating hours of the petrol station are proposed to be 24 hours a day as well. The land that is subject of this application is situated at the northwestern corner of the Bellarine Highway and Coppards Road. It's generally flat and has a total area of about 3,900 square metres. The frontage to the Bellarine Highway is approximately 33 metres in width, and the eastern side of the subject land fronts Coppards Road for a length of approximately 130 metres. At present, there's an existing single-storey dwelling with numerous outbuildings on the subject land. This dwelling is constructed of face brickwork with a tiled hipped roof. That existing dwelling presents to the Bellarine Highway. It's got a front setback of approximately 9.5 metres and a side street setback to Coppards Road of approximately 13 metres. Access is available to the site from both the Bellarine Highway and Coppards Road, and the subject land is zoned low density residential zone Schedule 1 and is covered by a special building overlay. The Bellarine Highway is zoned Transport Zone 2, forming part of the principal road network, and Coppards Road is zoned Transport Zone 3. Joining the site to the north is number 50 Coppards Road, and adjoining to the west is number 147 Bellarine Highway. Both of these properties are zoned low density residential zone Schedule 1. Number 50 Coppards Road exhibits a single dwelling constructed of timber weatherboard, corrugated metal roof with a number of outbuildings at its rear. Number 147 Bellarine Highway exhibits a single-storey brick dwelling of similar siting, size and scale to the existing dwelling on the subject land. Carport projects forward of the dwelling at number 147 within its front setback. Again, this property features a number of outbuildings at the rear of the dwelling. The wider locality to the south and east of the site is zoned Commercial 2 zone. The wider area features quite a variety of commercial uses and development. Opposite the subject site to the east, on Coppards Road, is a shopping centre with numerous tenancies, including multiple retail premises such as takeaway food, restaurants and shops, as well as a gym which is open 24/7. On the opposite side of the Bellarine Highway is an existing service station and various convenience restaurants, with some open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Notably, of the four corners at the junction of Bellarine Highway and Coppards Road, 3 currently exhibit commercial land uses and built forms. So the application's been assessed against the relevant requirements of the Greater Geelong Planning Scheme, and including as part of that assessment, it's been referred externally to the Department of Transport, Bowen Water, Power Corps and the Environment Protection Authority, as well as also being referred internally to councils, SBO stormwater engineers, development and traffic engineers, environmental health, parks, ESD being environmentally sustainable design, and urban design officers. No objection has been raised from the external authorities nor from council's internal departments to the grant of a permit. The low density residential zone, the clause itself within the scheme does not set any specific neighbourhood character objectives. And unlike the wider low density residential zone to the north, in view of the surrounding land uses and the significant traffic volumes, the immediate environs of the subject land are not considered to enjoy a significant low density character, nor does the area exhibit servicing issues. Furthermore, the subject land does not exhibit any identified environmental characteristics such as vegetation protected by planning controls. The proposed maximum building height would be over the proposed fuel pump area. The service station canopy, this would be the service station canopy rather, it would be approximately 6.7 metres in height in this location. The proposed station building with the registers in it, etc., would be a single-storey building, and it would have a maximum height of 5.5 metres. As mentioned before, it would have a brick external materials and a hipped roof form, which is considered to respond to the prevailing materials and built form exhibited within the dwellings to the north within the low density residential zone. The service station building would be set back approximately 3 metres from the western side boundary, reflecting a similar side setback to the existing dwelling on site. The convenience restaurant building would include a flat roof. It would have external materials of render and timber cladding and would exhibit a maximum height of 6.2 metres. That's the building situated centrally within the site. And the proposed car wash to the north would be a relatively small scale building exhibiting a maximum height of 5.6 metres with a heavily glazed elevation fronting Coppards Road and a gabled roof form. But it's considered that the combined roof forms and materials and single-storey scale of the proposed convenience restaurant and car wash would respond to the surrounding built form and established character, particularly that of the neighbouring commercial sites opposite the subject land to the east and to the south. In addition to these character considerations, the application has been supported by an acoustic assessment report. This report has assessed existing environmental noise and established existing ambient noise levels and presents recommended noise controls to mitigate potential off-site amenity impacts. The acoustic report identifies that in a worst case scenario, the proposed uses would largely comply with the relevant daytime, evening and nighttime criteria, albeit except for waste collection and delivery vehicles at night time. The Council's environmental health officers have reviewed the application, including the acoustic assessment, and have advised that no objection is raised to the grant of a permit, subject to appropriate conditions. As this area of non-compliance for noise criteria at night time is solely related to waste collection at night time, it's considered that these impacts can be mitigated by conditions limiting the waste collection to daytime hours. The proposed uses, the mix of uses, are considered to be urban uses, and it's acknowledged that they may attract a considerable number of visitors. Given the context of the subject land, surrounded by commercial uses and adjacent an intersection servicing up to 35,000 vehicles a day, which is considered somewhat unusual for a low-density residential zone to be situated on a junction of that size or of that volume. So it is not considered that it would be that the mix of uses would generate grounds to refuse the application in this regard. In terms of car parking, there's a total of 19 spaces proposed. This number complies with the minimum car parking provision required by the planning scheme. The breakdown of car parking spaces would be 6 serving the proposed service station, 10 for the proposed convenience restaurant, and 3 for the proposed car wash. This car parking provision and the car parking design and layout has been informed by a traffic impact assessment which was submitted with the application. That traffic impact assessment has also been reviewed by Council's traffic engineers, and again, no objections been raised to the grant of a permit, subject to conditions requiring some minor rearrangements to the car parking layout on the site. So in consideration of the matters raised, both within the objections received and taking into account the relevant policy considerations within the planning scheme, it is considered that the application proposes an appropriate use and development for the subject site in this location. In particular, given that the land has adequate access to services, it's situated on a major junction on an arterial road and is surrounded by established commercial premises within the Commercial 2 zone, that the proposed use and development would respond to this surrounding context and therefore would be suitably located on the subject site. It's therefore recommended that the responsible authority decides to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for the proposed use and development, subject to the conditions contained within the assessment report. But I do have one additional point to bring to the committee's attention, and that is that I believe it's been circulated. There is one additional condition which I'd like to include in the recommended conditions. This additional condition is required because the special building overlay conditions, which are recommended to be included on any permit, require boundary fence treatments to include a 150mm space above ground level. If the committee were of a mind to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit, the additional condition would sit at condition 1J and would require the submission of an acoustic barrier design detail which has been based on recommendations of a suitably qualified acoustic engineer in accordance with the special building overlay conditions of the permit. So just to clarify, that condition would read that in addition to the amended plans that would be required by condition 1, there would be one additional point at 1J, and it would require that detail of the design of acoustic fencing consistent with the special building overlay conditions of this permit, based upon the recommendations of a suitably qualified acoustic engineer, are submitted with those amended plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lewis. Very thorough. Now with section 2, do any members of the committee have questions for Lewis and any other officers? Councillor Maloney, please.
Thank you for that response. And with respect to that last condition, the acoustic fencing, it indicates that there'd be noises within earshot of the residences, I guess, and keep judging on the map, it's quite close that there are residential houses. Has any consideration been given to the proximity of residential dwellings and the off-gassing or the emission of volatile organic compounds from, I guess, fuel-storing vehicles when they're loading in and out?
Are you referring to odour emissions?
Odour and toxic organic compounds, yes.
So with the application was supported by an odour assessment as well.
Okay.
That odour assessment includes an air quality impact assessment which predicted that odour concentrations at all sensitive receptors would be below the relevant EPA criteria. And again, that's also been reviewed by Council's environmental health officers, and no objection was raised from environmental health officers.
Councillor Murray.
Thanks for that. Can you just confirm that there's, looking through the list of objectors, that the two immediate neighbours, being 147 Bellarine Highway and 50 Coppards Road, there have been no objections from those?
Give me one moment, Councillor Murray, I'll be able to confirm that for you.
Certainly not on the list, if I've overlooked it.
So there hasn't been one received from the immediate neighbour at number 147 Bellarine Highway.
The neighbours haven't objected.
What's the number of Coppards Road number?
Right.
Understand. Thank you.
I can answer the question as well. I'm able to answer it now, I should say. So there hasn't been an objection received from number 147 next door, and there hasn't been, I can't see that there has been an objection received from number 50 to the north.
Right. Now, I was pretty strict on the last scope, so we might get back to proper speaking procedure. Councillor Mason.
I might have some difficulty in understanding some of this, please. This is a low-density general residential zone 1. A lot of the things that we've considered on the basis of orderly development and in the way our municipality is zoned. And we have based many of our decisions on the zoning. Now, I fail to understand how this, how we're maintaining in the context of orderly development, such a development in a low-density general residential zone.
Thanks for your question, Councillor Mason. And the low-density residential zone, Schedule 1, is generally applied when there are residential lots or for the purpose of providing residential lots with sufficient area to manage their own wastewater on site because they don't have connection to sewer. In this instance, the application site is able to connect into the sewer network on Coppards Road. When you actually look at the purpose and the decision guidelines of the low density residential zone, it does talk to maintaining a low density character. But then when you look at the decision guidelines, it refers only to consideration of the planning policy framework, and it doesn't set any other specific decision guidelines. In that, a lot of the assessment is based on responding to the relevant policies applicable for the use and development that is proposed. And we need to consider the context in that respect as well. In terms of the policies that are applicable for, or are relevant rather, for the assessment of this type of application, there is a local policy which is for use and development in low density residential areas and rural living areas. That particular policy does not set any specific design criteria. So from that, a lot of the assessment will be based around the context that the site is in. And we've looked at the context, and when you stand in that junction of Bellarine Highway and Coppards Road, like I mentioned, there's 3 of the 4 corners that have commercial developments. They've all got built forms that are typical of commercial zones. And in this instance, this site is a bit of an outlier in the low density residential zone, Schedule 1, because it does in fact have access to the sewer.
Thank you for your answer. I'll just give you one more question, if that's okay. In any of these situations, there are boundaries between zones, and that sooner or later, wherever the boundary is, are we not supposed to comply with where that boundary is?
So there is a boundary where the zones change, and in terms of the planning provisions and the permit triggers for this application, they are in the low density residential zone. The low density residential zone sets the planning permit triggers for this application. It's not been assessed as though it's in a commercial 2 zone. It's been assessed as though it's in a low density residential zone surrounded by commercial 2 zoning. The proposed uses are Section 2 permissible uses, that they're not prohibited within the low density residential zone. So there is discretion there to grant a planning permit for these types of uses, provided that an application puts forward a satisfactory response to the planning policy framework.
Any councillors got questions for officers? Mr. Mansfield?
Thank you. Are there any, and you may not, I'm very much putting you on the spot here, but do we have other examples of this sort of development where the zones, where there's a low density zone, and we've got an application like this where there's surrounding commercial zones or adjacent commercial zones? Have we sort of used that principle before?
I
might have, and it's...
Yeah, I don't think I'd be able to confirm in my own experience. Like I said, it is a bit of an outlier in the low density residential zone that this particular lot has access to sewer. And that's where typically the low density residential zone is applied, where there is no access to sewer. But it does certainly appear as a bit of an island side a little bit, in that it is surrounded by the commercial 2 zone.
On the other sides, but around it otherwise is low density. They're all just regular that's all just residential. They're all just residential properties from my knowledge of the area.
Yeah. There is one residential property to the north, and the zone further to the north, which doesn't have access to the sewer.
Yep.
And then the properties fronting the northern side of Bellarine Highway to the west, which are also low density residential zone before transitioning back to general residential zone.
If this property didn't have access to sewer, would that change the decision?
Yes, it would.
The
site's able to be serviced and connect into that sewer, so it would be capable of effectively having a development and a use as proposed on it.
And so if this was developed, the adjacent residential properties couldn't be, it couldn't lead to sort of encroachment or spread of that commercial development because there's one next to it, because none of them have access, they don't have similar access to the sewer.
But I guess I'll just...
I'm looking at along the Bellarine Highway, for example, you could say, well, 147, 145, all of those, because it's suddenly adjacent to and surrounded by commercial properties, could they all be turned into... You could use the same argument for all of them.
So the sewer connection from the application site would be into the Coppards Road Reserve. That sewer infrastructure that already exists doesn't continue in front of those properties to the west on Bellarine Highway. In saying that, every application that is lodged needs to be assessed on its own merits, so we would need to consider those types of things in any future application. But at this point in time, that sewer infrastructure doesn't run in front of those properties.
Other questions of officers? I'll now open up for submitters to address the floor. Any submitters who wish to address have a 3-minute time limit. I do have a list of objectors who wish to address first of all. So let me just bring that back up. This one I have is a Lisa Blackwell. Is Lisa here with us, speaking? Please, Lisa.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lisa Blackwell. I live at 59 Coppards Road in Moorlap, which is across the road. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to address the Planning Committee in regards to the development of 149 Bellarine Highway. My comprehensive objection that my husband and I wrote, I believe I've already emailed to you all at the time we had to submit them, just so you were informed, has already addressed our concerns, our challenges to the planning application, and more concerningly, its assumptions versus the reality of how we will be impacted in our everyday life through increased air pollution, noise pollution, 24 hours a day, light pollution, 24 hours a day, the impacts on our native wildlife that live in our area, such as the little frogs, the possums, the orange-bellied parrot, numerous birds that we have in our wonderful gardens. The increase of traffic at the intersection of Bellarine Highway and Coppards Road, the impacts of the flow of this said traffic through the intersection and the safe flow along Coppards Road that we have to drive through every day, especially with the proposed entrant and exit and 2 exit driveways, the bus stops, the turning left and turning right heading south along Coppards Road, as well as navigating the existing driveways that we already have to deal with. Risky driver behaviour to miss red lights by driving through the proposed petrol station out onto Coppards Road, whilst we know this already happens. People avoid the red lights by driving through 7-Eleven so they can get onto Coppards Road. So they fly through those petrol bowsers. It's dangerous. So we already know that there's a predisposition to risky driver behaviour. There will be too much pressure on what is already a poorly functioning blind turning intersection when you have to turn left from the Bellarine Highway onto Coppards Road heading towards the Port Arlington Road. You turn around and if there's cars turning right into the commercial car parks there, you run the risk of getting tail end from cars coming behind you. The length of this block is beyond this intersection of 149. It also goes along Coppards Road to a low density residential area. This is where we live. And this is where we enjoy our idyllic lifestyle on our acre and a quarter blocks. This is where we have our character trees, our native animals, our native reptiles, and our lovely birds. We also have septic tanks. So I just thought I'd pop that in after listening to what we've just heard.
You have 3 minutes, Lisa. I'll give you 30 seconds to
Whilst we appreciate the developer's situation, they're not going to have to live with it. We do. We have a wonderful lifestyle where we are in Coppards Road, and I just want to say in closing that I'd like for you to have a look at our objection, because it's just too much to take up in 3 minutes. I've done a lot of work on it, so I appreciate it. I'd also like to give my apologies from Liam Blackwell, Connor Blackwell and Samantha Day, because they were unable to attend today due to work constraints. But I thank you all for your time and your considerations with us. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, so I've registered to speak here a Mary Feuermeister. Okay. Oh, Mary.
Hello, I've never done this before, so bear with me.
No worries.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about my concerns. This is this new development facing Ballerine Highway. Coming down Coppards Road, there's 3 driveways. Now, opposite another one that goes into the meat place and little development, and the vets, right? And as an 82-year-old, firstly, I'm worried about the increased safety risk around the intersection. It is already unsafe, and I worry when I have to use it now. Increased traffic with 3 more driveways will increase risk, not to mention trucks that will be pulling up to go to the service station and so forth, and park along Coppards Road where drivers use the business. I also believe it is incompatibly increased noise and light, especially with 2 north-south facing lit up signs, and the noise from the drive-through speakers and the takeaway restaurant. I do not understand why it's necessary to have another petrol station, car wash, convenience shop and fast food takeaway restaurant when we have more than enough in this immediate area. I think it is overkill, and it is development will impact on my sense of safety and security, especially at night, and I think it is totally unnecessary in the area on that corner. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Mary. So I also registered a Ewan McMillan. Is Ewan here this evening? Oh, that's okay. I also have a Debbie Troop. Debbie, please.
Thank you. We reside at 61 Coppards Road, which is across the road and next to the Blackwells. I just really want to express my concerns with this development, as has been mentioned with all the wildlife by Lisa. We have a car wash within 200 metres either way on the Ballerine Highway, with a service station. We have the 7-Eleven with the service station. I want to bring up concerns about the corner with the people that do run the red lights. Worst case scenario that has been mentioned tonight, that word, worst case scenario is they're crazy at night. They run the red lights. My husband and I and our granddaughter nearly got cleaned up recently, only that my husband was a truck driver. He waited straight through the red light. Had we gone across, we would have been hit, no doubt. Safety concern in the area with the 24-hour venues. We have, lots of foot traffic. We have the police helicopter that flies over more regularly than we've ever seen it before. And, we have run the risk of the people in the street. We have DHS homes. We have the homeless living down one end of it, we have people sit on our front fence, alcohol, drunk, and this is just even through the day. Turning into our driveway through the day, if there's a funeral from the funeral home down the street, unless people are really respectful to let us turn into our driveway, they don't. We sit there till we can turn. Added pressure on cars coming into the convenience stores, coming out. The driveway's a really big concern opposite where the Biz food place is and Presenzo's, the restaurants. When you try and turn in there, if you want to come out and turn right down Coppards Road, again, cars are turning around the corner very quickly at the intersections. It is very, it's scary, to use for want of a better word. I'm coming up 67, not old, not young. However, you have to have safety all the time. You drive not thinking that you're going to get hit and you might be in the right. We don't need another fast food outlet there. 7-Eleven had conversations. The gentleman there didn't put a letter in because it's a franchise. Safety with people at night coming in, they worry about their safety being robbed. And, if I can just bring up, we hear the squealing of the cars in their car park at all hours of the night. The hoons that's what they do. They plant it, they skid, and they just drive around there. So it's another excuse to come across to another convenience store, 24/7, as well as, concerned about, I've heard it, concerned about the odours and things like that. My husband's a brain cancer survivor, so we have the peace and serenity that we need and that we bought our house for, as well as, the ambience of where we are. So, I strongly object to this development going ahead because we just have so much in that area now that meets our needs. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other objectors or submitters who wish to address the committee? I'll move down. Thank you, everybody, for the submissions made thus far. I will now ask the applicant to come up and address the committee or the representative, please. So if you just state your name, sir, you'll have up to 10 minutes, should you wish.
Good evening, councillors, officers and the public. My name is Karan Mungera. I'm representing the applicant for this application. I think Lewis did a fantastic job, first of all, explaining the proposal, and I think he covered most of the items I wanted to cover. Of particular reference, I would say, is when looking at this application, you've got to look at it in terms of its site and how specific it is to this site. If this application had to come in anywhere else, yes, it's quite contentious. We get that it is a neighbourhood residential zone, but it is an anomaly in this instance. It's quite rare to find low-density zones adjoined by commercial zones and by highways. Generally, you have a buffer amount, and usually it transitions from a low density to a general residential zone, and mainly on local streets where you have low traffic volumes. In this instance, you've got a main highway on one of its frontages. So that's one of the points I think we just have to address, in that when looking at this application, we need to look at it on its merits and with the site in particular. In terms of the land uses proposed, they aren't very specific land uses that are going to generate traffic from other areas of the municipality coming in. It's a convenience type of use, so the expected use of that site is going to be for the cars that are already existing on that highway. So you've already got a high volume of cars coming on Bellarine Highway. We're expecting to cater to that already exists. When looking at the other operations in terms of car washes, the difference between our application is it's not an automated car wash. It's not like those car washes you go and you spray your car. It's actually a hand wash car facility, so it's going to have workers on the side that hand wash cars. So it's almost a very small operation that caters to 1, 2, or 3 cars at the very max. In light of the safety concerns, I'd also like to bring to the attention that we've discussed with council that we would be providing a footpath along the eastern portion of our site. There isn't a footpath over there, and there's a bus stop. So we are relocating that bus stop further north so that it sits between the access points, and we're providing that additional, I guess you could call it, safety component where pedestrians actually have an option to walk down to the bus stop. It seems like traffic issues surrounding the intersection already exist, and I think it would be unfair to be penalised for an issue that already exists, and that it is in the hands of the Department of Transport, given that it is given the road zoning of it. Again, with traffic, it has been considered by our private and our traffic engineers. By council's traffic engineers, and it's also been referred to the Department of Transport, none of which have objected to it. In terms of waste and odour, we've also provided support for a waste management plan, so that will sort of deal with deliveries of fuel trucks or any potential waste from the site. They will be limited to during office hours only. So when it comes to large trucks and stuff getting into the site, I think that's going to be during office hours. I think based on the lack of objections from referral authorities and council's position, I think this application in its context is appropriate for this site. And on that basis, I'd like to conclude and answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you very much. Open that to the committee for questions. But first, I just have one. You just said you'll be providing a footpath on the eastern side. So the opposite side of the road.
So the eastern portion, eastern boundary of
the eastern
our
boundary,
side.
okay.
Yeah. Eastern,
side.
yeah,
Yes.
eastern boundary of our
Excellent.
side.
Thank you. All right.
So we've been in discussions with DOT about that, and they've reviewed that and have provided their comments as well.
Councillors, any questions of the applicant's representative? No? No questions? Then we'll move on. Do I have any comments to be made first? Mason?
I'm giving thought to putting the alternate recommendation. I'm sure, and I have confidence, that the design work that's been done would be done so that there would be a safe and well-serviced facility. My concern is that we need to maintain orderly development. And my concern is that people have a general expectation that they're living in a certain amenity with a certain character, and that character is, until it's decided to be changed, maybe by this council through a recommendation from our planning committee, etc. But at the moment, it's a low-density general residential zone, and I think people have a right to live within that zone in peaceful existence. And it's interesting that we do have such a large city that needs high-density development, but we do have these lower density areas, and as the objectors have explained, they have the love of their environment, they've developed their areas in the expectation it will remain like that. And so therefore, I'm not comfortable with an encroachment, no matter how well designed it might be, no matter how good the acoustics are or whatever else. It's not appropriate for that area until it's publicly and properly rezoned. So in that light, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. If there's no further comments to be made from the council group, or the committee, should I say, I'll ask for a recommendation to be put forth. Councillor Mason, you wish to move the alternative recommendation?
I shall.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Second by Councillor Mansfield. Councillor Mason, you may speak to it if you wish.
I think I've spoken enough. Do you want me to read the whole alternate?
Yes, please.
So the responsible authority, having considered all matters which the Planning and Environment Act 1987 requires it to consider, decides to refuse to grant a planning permit for the use and development of a service station, convenience restaurant, drive-through and a car wash, and alter access to a road in a Transport Zone 2 at 149 Bellarine Highway, Newcombe, on the following grounds. 1. The proposal fails to meet the objectives of clauses 15.01-1S, Urban Design, 15.01-2S, Building Design, 15.015S, Neighbourhood Character, and 21.06-6, Neighbourhood Character. In particular, the proposal does not, A, respond to its context in the terms of character, natural features and surrounding landscape within the surrounding low-density residential zone 15.01-1S. B, sufficiently minimise the detrimental impact on neighbouring properties and the natural environment, nor retain existing vegetation 15.01-2S. C, respond to its context and reinforce the valued features and characteristics of the local environment, including the natural landscape, character and established neighbourhood character 15.01-5S. And D, retain existing vegetation on site or maintain the existing character of the surrounding low density residential zone area 21.06-6. Number 2, the proposal fails to meet the objectives of clause 22.04, which is use and development in rural living and low density residential areas. A, protect the amenity on the surrounding low density residential location from activities incompatible with the primary residential purpose of the zone. B, maintain the low density character of the low density residential zone area. And C, discourage an urban activity which may attract substantial numbers of visitors to the site. 3, the proposal is an unsatisfactory response to the purpose of the low density residential zone Schedule 1. In particular, the proposed use and development would not, A, provide for low density residential development. Point 4, the proposal is an unsatisfactory response to the decision guidelines of clause 65.01. In particular, the application would fail to meet the purpose of the zone and objectives contained within the planning policy framework, would detract from the amenity of the zone, would detract from the amenity of the area as a result of the use being incompatible with the surrounding low-density residential zone, and would not provide for the orderly planning of the area.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Mansfield, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Mason, for reading out that lengthy alternate recommendation. I'm supportive of the alternate on similar grounds to what Councillor Mason outlined. I'm very familiar with this area, and there is a distinct change in the area, despite it being on a very busy, at a very busy intersection. And I acknowledge that there are, there's quite intense commercial activity that occurs on the other 3 corners of this intersection. This corner does mark the beginning of a distinct change in the neighbourhood character. It was mentioned that there isn't the typical buffer between zones that you might see, but I think this sort of development will further erode whatever buffer there is, which is essentially the road is the buffer between those zones. By putting a development like this on that corner, it really is a very different kind of intensity of activity that's occurring very close to low-density residential areas surrounding it. I note that the applicant has said that they have, sounds like you've worked with one of the residents, and they seem to be happy with the development, but there are a number of other surrounding residences that will be impacted by this. So it's really around the appropriateness of the development for the zoning. But I do thank the applicant for it sounds like the time and effort and the excellent presentation you've given here, because it's very succinct and it sounded like you've taken into account a broad range of considerations. But I do think on the grounds of the zoning and the character of the existing area that this isn't an appropriate development.
Councillor Mansfield, any other councillors wish to speak? If not, Councillor Murray, please.
Look, I'm going to speak against the recommendation, and to Lisa, Mary, and Debbie, I thank you for what you've said tonight. I think that's all been covered off in the application, and I think we have to make our decision on the planning policy framework, the relevant policies that are relevant to this application, and my view is that this application can be ticked off in against the objections that have been raised in the context of the site. I think it's probably fortunate that there's a sewer close by on Coppides Road, to be quite honest. That's my view. But I have to assess this on its merits, and I'll speak against the recommendation that's before the committee.
Sorry. So for the councillor's comment, I'm happy to put this to the vote. I'll move the alternate recommendation as moved by Councillor Mason. All those in favour? Those against? The alternate recommendation is carried. Thank you, everybody at home and everybody in the chamber. That draws to a closed meeting 223 of the Planning Committee at 9:07 p.m. 8:07. Feels like 9. Thank you all.
It does. Thank you.